Upheaval of a different sort altogether in the Philippines. A volcano erupted in
In 1991, a volcano in the Philippines called Mount Pinatubo erupted. The eruption was devastating, spewing ash and 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the air. But in its aftermath, scientists observed something else. For a little while, all that sulfur dioxide in the air partially blocked the sun and caused the entire planet's temperature to temporarily drop by 0.5 degrees Celsius. Now, an American startup wants to imitate that cooling effect to fight the effects of our warming planet.
I couldn't figure out why scientists hadn't done this.
The idea that we might engineer what might be called the good part of the volcano has taken off and increasingly has found capital willing to fund it.
It's a crazy and controversial idea that's recently been attracting billionaire philanthropists.
For these guys in Silicon Valley, it's really appealing because it's very like superhero, and it's reliant on this idea that we can use technology to like create a better world.
Other groups are looking for what they say are safer, more sustainable cooling methods, like modifying the ocean using whale poo. But testing and proving all these technologies is difficult.
It's gonna hit.
And expensive.
We've still got some testing and tweaking to do with the biopod.
And as temperatures rise, time is running out.
The science writer Eli Kintich, he had a very clever bumper sticker for this whole conversation, and that was geoengineering, a terrible idea whose time has come.
And even if the science does work, is geoengineering just an excuse for continuing our dirty emissions?
At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
Hold this.
Currently, we're inflating the balloon with sulfur dioxide, SO2.
Which is one of the substances emitted by volcanoes, and this serves as our sunscreen for Earth. It reflects a little bit of sunlight from the stratosphere for 2 years before falling back to Earth.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Launching. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Nice.
This is Luke Eisman and Andrew Song of Make Sunsets. The serial entrepreneurs are using a fairly basic and decidedly unorthodox technique to cool the planet. It sits in a category of ideas known as geoengineering.
Geoengineering is the application of some technology or method globally in order to address the symptoms of climate change. There's solar radiation management, which is a fancy way of saying blocking sunlight from coming into the Earth.
The basic idea is this. A special aircraft, or balloon in this case, flies into the stratosphere, so way higher than a regular commercial jet. The aircraft releases sulfur dioxide. The balloon just pops from the low air pressure. The SO2 reflects a small portion of solar radiation back into space, which then cools the planet, in theory. And then the amount of SO2 released determines how much the planet is cooled. So it's similar to a volcano, but theoretically with less of a threat to human lives and property. We just don't know.
The other form is called carbon geoengineering. It can draw carbon dioxide either directly out of the air or, in some cases, capture it.
CO2 is captured from the air or directly from sources like power plants. It's then turned into liquid by adding water and then injected deep underground where it reacts with rocks to form stable carbonate minerals. Kind of like sweeping it under the rug, except for thousands and thousands of years. But the process is wildly energy intensive, since it takes a lot of air to capture any significant amount of CO2. It also requires large upfront investments, with some of the world's first carbon capture plants costing millions of dollars.
With direct air capture, you can literally measure the carbon that you're pulling out the atmosphere. And that makes it really attractive to investors because you know exactly what you've removed. You can't necessarily say that for if you plant a tree.
That fact has made direct carbon capture the gold standard of geoengineering methods. But some scientists say this isn't a question of either or. We may soon need both.
The international goal set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement was to halt global warming at 1.5 degrees. So it's extremely unlikely we're going to make that.
I describe solar radiation management as a painkiller. It only really targets the symptom of climate change, the heat. It is the one thing that we know would turn the thermostat down on planet Earth.
Sounds like a huge business opportunity, except for a not-so-tiny, not-so-insignificant problem. Scientists don't understand the chemistry of sulfur in the upper atmosphere.
We don't know how much a dose cools the planet. We don't know if continued geoengineering will wreck weather patterns like monsoons or destroy opportunities for agriculture in different parts of the world who may not have had a say in whether we're going to do it or not.
There have been no large-scale experiments so far on solar radiation management. Scientists are confident that solar radiation management would cool the planet. But then, after that, the scientific community are pretty divided. In 2022, there was an open letter published calling for non-use agreement, and this has now been signed by 550+ academics. But also in 2023, another open letter was published calling for essential research into this solar radiation management.
I politely disagree with scientists who think we need to have a 99.999% understanding of the exact amount of cooling, because we don't have that for the warming created by CO2. We can't let precision be the enemy of action.
And Make Sunsets is acting one balloon at a time for now. In California, we join them as they launch their sulfur-filled balloons.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Although they haven't quite worked out all of the kinks.
We are not buoyant enough. But let's see.
Oof. Come on. It's gonna hit.
And when you apply the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things, sometimes things break.
Please stop filming.
Or get stuck on those important-looking wires.
Dude, I don't think it's gonna pop, man. It's pretty thick.
It's a BB gun. It would definitely pop it.
But with the help of a metal pole and a ladder, the work continues.
There you go. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, baby. Nice job.
According to Make Sunset's website, they've already launched over 130 balloons. They say that that's the equivalent of planting more than 4 million trees, but there's currently no verification process to prove this equivalence.
This is the only technology that will materially cool the planet during our lifetime. To not pursue that as startups, as governments, as individuals is frankly irresponsible in my opinion.
That claim is shared by some climate activists and venture capitalists, including Tim Draper of Draper Associates and his son Adam of Boost VC, who have both backed Make Sunsets.
They kind of have the same attitude as the co-founders. What are we all waiting for? Like, this is a solution. We can do this now. Why aren't we doing it? I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. And, Tim and Adam have signed on with that, and that's sort of why they're funding him.
We had $500,000 lined up before we even had any customers. So that gave us the runway to even experiment with this.
So far, they say they've raised $1 million from Draper Associates, Pioneer Fund, and Boost VC. Other billionaires have been investing in the research of solar radiation management for years. Bill Gates, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskowitz, and OpenAI's Sam Altman have all either directly contributed or voiced support for the technology.
I think just last year, 75 million has been announced in funding for more research into solar radiation management. But as a whole, the direct air capture market is much more established. So between 2018 and 2022, there was about $3 billion spent on upscaling and developing carbon removal as a whole, and about 46% of that went to direct air capture.
Most of the attention and most of the money is on sucking carbon out of the air, but that's a really expensive and complicated project, and it would take a lot of that being done to make a huge dent in our overall carbon budget. On the other hand, solar radiation management is a lot cheaper. So $1 billion in solar geoengineering and $1 billion in carbon sequestration is a completely different thing. So we're talking about this very expensive, very complicated thing, and this relatively very cheap and relatively simple thing, which would be blocking the sun.
Currently, if you want to remove a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, it can cost anywhere from $500 to $700 per ton. We charge $1.
That sounds like a simple sales pitch, but the devil is in the details.
Say you're doing stratospheric aerosol injection. To have an impact on the climate as a whole, this would have to be done globally, 24/7, forever.
Basically, a fleet of planes would need to continually release sulfur to keep our temperatures down. And if we suddenly stop,
that could mean a huge rise in temperatures without enough time to adapt or mitigate the impacts.
This is called termination shock.
I don't think that this can be a commercial venture. Because of the risk of termination shock, that company would have to exist forever. They would need to be doing this around the clock in international airspace. And so you need all countries to be on board with this plan.
And the politics around geoengineering are tricky. When Make Sunsets released its balloons in Mexico, the country banned geoengineering experiments altogether.
A country, if it decides to deploy solar radiation management on its own, it could impact the weather of its next door neighbors, and that could be seen as an act of war. These questions need to be answered on a kind of global consensus, and frankly, we haven't seen that level of international cooperation yet.
Whether startups like Make Sunsets can have an impact on our climate is questionable. But one thing's certain, they've kickstarted a debate about the need to employ more drastic measures in the battle against climate change. And with it, they may have opened the door for other startups in the geoengineering space to enter through.
I think it's more dangerous to do nothing, and I think that in general, people should take actions to try to solve problems that are important to them.
The only thing that's preventing us from scaling right now is demand, really. And that demand, I believe, will increase as the world heats up. That's a sad part of this entire thing. Mother Nature is actually our best marketing person. As the world heats up, as there's more catastrophic climate events, as there's more hurricanes, people will start to say, why is it getting so hot and why isn't anyone doing anything about this?
Another geoengineering mission underway to reverse climate change is by Edwina Tanner and her team at WhaleX. Today, they're getting ready for a day of collecting data in the Coral Sea. Their aim is to suck up carbon from the atmosphere with the help of these guys.
Whales are the original climate engineers. They come up to the surface waters and they evacuate large fecal plumes of really rich nutrients.
These plumes of poo are quite important.
These nutrients are really important to feeding the bottom of the food chain and the marine environment.
The nutrients found in the plumes feed phytoplankton, kickstarting an increase known as phytoplankton bloom. The phytoplankton naturally capture CO2 via photosynthesis and convert the CO2 into organic compounds. After the phytoplankton die, they sink to the deep ocean, carrying carbon with it. The whole process is considered a biological carbon pump. and transfers about 10 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere to the deep ocean each year. To simulate their own carbon pump, WhaleX invented a substance called aquafood, which is artificial whale poo. The aquafood would be tailored to local climates and released in multiple locations, thus exponentially increasing the amount of carbon removed from the atmosphere. This is a type of marine geoengineering or ocean fertilization. Once the aquafood has been perfected, the WhaleX team hopes to spread it across existing shipping routes.
We're also looking at just adapting ships that are already crisscrossing the ocean and giving them modular plants for ocean nourishment, which could all happen in the right ocean location. This way we could do light touches of ocean nourishment, but all around the world off different ships. I think shipping itself needs to decarbonize, so this could be part of the solution for the whole shipping industry.
There are desert areas of the ocean. By adding nutrients to these desert areas, we can make phytoplankton grow in large quantities.
It has a bunch of eggs in it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, gosh, it's amazing. Phytoplankton are tiny, you can't even see them, but they are the climate giants and they are the things that are actually going to save us. They provide 50% of the oxygen that we breathe on the Earth. And from our experiments, by putting in 200 litres of nutrients, which is about a 1 whale poo, we can actually sequester about a tonne of carbon.
But phytoplankton, some of which are algae, can grow too much, producing toxic algae blooms. You typically see this in stagnant or slow-moving rivers or lakes or on the coastlines.
But this does not happen in the open ocean. With a whale fecal plume, the nutrients are able to be used by phytoplankton productively instead of destructively.
This, proving their work is productive and not destructive, is the challenge. Studies on ocean fertilization aren't yet conclusive. And safely testing the science without harming sensitive ecosystems takes money, time, and expertise. For billionaires or anxious VCs looking for quick results, it's not ideal.
Billionaire philanthropists are really focused on impact, and they're looking for data and ways that they can measure that their dollars are making an impact on whatever issue they're interested in, from public health or education, everything.
To actually do the science we're doing literally costs the amount of a blockbuster movie.
Today is a big day for the WhaleX team as they prepare to embark on a 4-day research trip. It's taken them a year to build their own biopod, which allows them to test the effects of their aquafood on a controlled area of the ocean. The biopod pumps air and nutrients into the water, growing phytoplankton.
The nutrient is essentially feeding the phytoplankton, which are in the seawater.
Yep. Why is it sinking at this end and not and right at that end?
But the biopod's first trip into the wild doesn't go as expected. It keeps sinking.
Some of the aeration chambers didn't fire because of too much pressure, so we'll need a bigger pump to make that work. So yes, not exactly to plan, as a lot of experiments are, but we are going to get some pretty good data that will inform our next trial.
The experiment is scrapped and will need to be repeated. And that takes, you guessed it, money.
I was told point blank by a very prominent head of a venture capital fund that if I talk to a company who has a brilliant idea but a meh business plan, and then I talk to a company that has maybe not such a good idea, but a very good business plan that's going to make money, I'm going to fund Company B every time. And I really find this is a bit of a juxtaposition, because what we need to fund is these really good ideas that are great for the planet, but perhaps are not so great for your wallet.
Despite being an early mover, WhaleX's growth has been stunted by a lack of funding. Right now, WhaleX says its main support comes from Professor Wien and other private donations. In 2025, they hope to complete a crowdfunding campaign and strike deals with industry partners.
It's almost like what you need to do to write a successful science paper is sort of the opposite of what you need to do to sell a business model. You have all of these forces that encourage you to attract attention and be flashy and speak with utter confidence. In science, there's no such thing as 0% or 100% confidence.
In the meantime, the only other way to raise funds is to offer carbon credits.
Once you can prove and verify your carbon sequestration, then you can actually sell off your credits to a company. We're not quite there yet, but this is the aim that in the future this will happen.
So, step one for all these startups is figuring out how much carbon you've removed from the atmosphere, which, when you're dealing with a sample size the size of the ocean, is challenging enough. Then you need to apply a dollar amount to that carbon. And since the carbon offsets market is what you might call loosely regulated,
It's been very confusing, very wild, wild west.
that dollar amount is flexible. And while there is an existing framework to rely on for the calculation of carbon removal credits, there's no such thing for solar radiation management. Make Sunsets, for example, sell something it's called cooling credits.
We sell cooling credits, where 1 gram of SO2 in the stratosphere offsets the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. That would literally cost $16 per year for you to offset your carbon footprint for 1 year.
Mate Sunset's cooling credits are really quite murky in how they're calculated.
It'll be verified via existing satellite infrastructure that can already detect volcanic eruptions, and it's just infrared cameras. And so at scale, you don't have to trust us anymore. There's satellites that currently detect volcanic eruptions that can also detect our deployments at scale.
From an investor point of view, something like ocean fertilization, although it's very novel, the science is not quite there yet, there is a path to market through the EU carbon dioxide removal framework. There is a lot of rigorous work going into making sure that these credits do what they say they do. That is not the case for solar radiation management.
For now, the marriage between experimental geoengineering and the private sector is an imperfect union. But as the need for climate solutions grows, so too will the interest in unconventional methods.
We have to be able to crawl before we can walk, and then before we can run. The best analogy I can give is, Jeff Bezos, Google, they started in a garage. This is the garage you're looking at right now.
There is very little doubt that the pressures that are causing people to investigate geoengineering as a mature, rational option, that's just going to keep on keeping on. Every year, every decade that the world warms, we're going to need solutions that may seem increasingly less desperate.
And with all of these geoengineering concepts, there is an elephant with a colossal carbon footprint stomping around the room: human emissions.
It's not a solution to the problem. Climate change is caused by industrial greenhouse gas emissions going up into the atmosphere and warming the planet. And geoengineering isn't gonna reverse that basic fact. At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.